In the fading light of a close-door autumn afternoon, Martin Stoner plodded his way along muddy lanes and ruts. Rut, Rut seemed the contrast that led. He knew not exactly whether somewhere in front of him he fancied lay the sea, and toward the sea his footsteps seemed persistently turning. Why he was struggling wearily forward to go that goal, he could scarcely have explained it unless he was possessed by the same instinct that turns a hard-pressed stag cliffward in its last extremity. In his case, the hounds of fate were certainly pressing him with unrelenting insistence. Hunger, fatigue, and despairing helplessness had numbed his brain, and he could scarcely summon sufficient energy to wonder what underlying impulse was driving him onward. Stoner was one of those unfortunate individuals who seemed to have tried everything. Unnatural slothfulness and improvidence had always intervened to blight any chance of even moderate success, and now he was at the end of his tether, and there was nothing more to try. Dormant, the try. Desperation had not awakened him in any dormant reserve of energy. On that certain the contrary, a mental torpor grew up round the crisis of his fortunes. With the clothes he stood up in, a halfpenny in his pocket, and no single friend or acquaintance to turn to, with no prospect either of a bed for the night or a meal for the morrow, Martin Stoner trudged stolidly forward between the moist hedgerows and beneath dripping trees, his mind almost a blank, except that he knew, subconsciously, aware that somewhere in front obtruded itself, and now and then, the knowledge that he was simply miserably hungry. Presently, he came to a halt by an open gateway that led to a spacious and rather neglected farm garden. There was little sign of life about, and the farmhouse at the further end of the garden looked chill and inhospitable. A drizzle rain, however, was setting in, and Stoner thought that here, perhaps, he might obtain a few minutes' shelter, and buy a glass of milk with his last remaining coin. He turned slowly and wearily into the garden, and followed a narrow flagged path up to the side door. Before he had time to knock, the door opened, and a bent, withered-looking old man stood aside in the doorway, and though to let him pass in.
Could I come in out of the rain?
Stoner began, but the old man interrupted him.
Come in, Master Tom. I knew you would come back one of these days.
Stoner lurched across the threshold and stood staring uncomprehendingly at the other.
Sit down while I put you out a bit of supper,
said the old man, with a quivering eagerness. Stoner's legs gave way from very weariness, and he sank inertly into the armchair that had been pushed up to him. In another minute, he was devouring the cold meat, cheese, and bread that had been placed on the table at his side.
You little changed these 4 years,
went on the old man, in a voice that sounded to Stoner as something in a dream, far away and consequent.
But you'll find us a deal. Changed you will. There's no one about the place same as when you left. Not but me and your old aunt. I go and tell her that you come. She won't be seeing you, but she'll let you stay right enough. She always did say if you was to come back, you would stay, but she'd never set eyes on you or speak to you again.
The old man placed a mug of beer on the table in front of Stoner, and then hobbled away down a long passage. The drizzle of rain had changed to a furious lashing downpour, which had beat violently against the door and windows. The wanderer thought with a shudder of what the seashore must look like under this drenching rainfall. With night beating down on all sides, he finished their food and beer and sat numbly waiting for the return of his strange host. As the minutes ticked by on the grandfather clock, in the corner of a new hope began to flicker and grow in the young man's mind. It was merely the expansion of his former craving for food and a few minutes' rest into a longing to find a night's shelter under the seemingly hospitable roof. A clattering of footsteps down the passage heralded the old farm servant's return.
The old missus, won't you see, Master Tom, but she says you are to stay. 'Tis right enough. Seeing the farm will be yours when she be put under earth. I had a fire lit in your room, Master Tom, and the maids have put fresh sheets onto the bed. You'll find not changed up there. Maybe you'll tired and would like to go there now.
Without a word, Martin Stoner rose heavily to his feet and followed his ministering angel along a passage, up a short, creaking stair, along another passage, and into a large room lit with cheerful blazing fire. There was but little furniture, plain old-fashioned and good of its kind. A stuffed squirrel in the case, and a wall calendar of 4 years ago were about the only symptoms of decoration. But Stoner had eyes for little else than a bed, and could scarce wait to tear his clothes off on before rolling into a luxury of weariness run into its comfortable depths. The hounds of fate seemed to have checked for a brief moment. In the cold light of morning, Stoner laughed mirthlessly as he slowly realized the position in which he found himself. Perhaps he might snatch a bit of breakfast on the strength of his likeness to the other missing ne'er-do-well and get safely away before anyone discovered the fraud that had been thrust on him. In the room downstairs, he found the bent old man, ready with a dish of bacon and fried eggs for Master Tom's breakfast. While a hard-faced elderly maid brought in a teapot and poured him out a cup of tea, as he sat at the table, a small spaniel came up and made friendly advances.
"'Tis old Baker's pup,"
explained the old man, whom the hard-faced maid had addressed as George.
"She was main fond of you. Never seemed the same after you went away to Australia. She died about a year ago. Agone. 'Tis her pup."
Stoner found it difficult to read her decease As a witness for identification, she would have left something to be desired,
You'll go for a ride, Master Tom?
was the next startling proposition that came from the old man.
We've a nice little roan cob that goes well in saddle. Old Bidley is getting a bit up in years. Thrower goes well still, but I'll have the little roan saddle and brought round to door. I've got no riding things,
Stammered the castaway, almost laughing as he looked down at his one suit of well-worn clothes.
Master Tom.
Said the old man, earnestly, almost with an offended air.
All your things is just as you left them. A bit of airing before the fire and they'll be all right. T will be a bit of a distraction, like a little riding and wild fooling now and again. You'll find the folk around here has hard and bitter minds toward you. They hasn't forgotten nor forgiven. No one come near you, so you'd best get what distraction you can with horse and dog. Them good company too.
Old George hobbled away to give his orders, and Stoner, feeling more than ever like one in a dream, went upstairs to inspect Master Tom's wardrobe. A ride was one of the pleasures dearest to his heart, and there was some protection against immediate discovery of his posture, and the thought that none of Tom's aforetime companions were likely to favor him with a close inspection. As the interloper thrust himself onto the tolerably well-fitting riding cords, he wondered vaguely what manner of misdeed the genuine Tom had committed to set the whole countryside against him. The thud of quick, eager hooves on damp earth cut short his speculations. The roan cob had been brought up to the side door.
Talk of beggars on horseback?
Thought Stoner to himself as he trotted rapidly along the muddy lanes where he had tramped yesterday as a down-that-hill outcast. And then he flung his reflections indolently aside and gave himself up to the pleasure of a smart canter along the turf-grown side of a level stretch of road. At an open gateway, he checked his pace to allow two carts to turn in a field. The lad driving the cart found time to give him a prolonged stare, and as he passed on, he heard an excited voice call out,
"'Tis Tom Prick. I knowed him at once, showing himself here again. Is he?"
Evidently, the likeness which had imposed at close quarters on a doddering old man was good enough to mislead younger eyes at a short distance. In the course of his ride, he met with ample evidence to confirm the statement that local folk had neither forgotten nor forgiven the bygone crime which had come to him as a legacy from the absent Tom. Scowling looks, mutterings and nudgings greeted him whenever he chanced upon human beings. Broker's pup, trotting placidly by his side, seemed the one element of friendliness in a hostile world. As he dismounted at the side door, he caught a fleeting glimpse of a gaunt elderly woman peering at him from behind the curtain of an upper window. Evidently, this was the aunt by adoption. Over an ample midday meal that stood in the readiness for Stoner, was able to review the possibilities of his extraordinary situation. The real Tom, after 4 years of absence, might suddenly turn up at the farm, or a letter might come from him at any moment. Again, in the character of fire to the farm, the false Tom might be called on to sign documents which would have an embracing predicament, or a relative might arrive who would not imitate the aunt's attitude of aloofness. All these things would mean ignominious exposure. On the other hand, the alternatives was the open sky, and the muddy lanes that led down to the sea was the farm offered him. At any rate, a temporary refuge from destitution. Farming was one of the many things he had tried, and he would be able to do a certain amount of work in return for the hospitality to which he was so little entitled.
Will you have cold pork for your supper?
Asked the hard-faced maid as he cleared the table.
Or will you have it hotted up?
Jack,
Hot with onions.
said Stoner. It was the only time in his life that he had made a rapid decision. And as he gave the order, he knew that he meant to stay. Stoner kept rigidly to those portions of the house which seemed to have been allotted to him by the tacit treaty of demolition. When he took part in the farm work, it was one who worked under orders and never them. Old George, the Roan Callbucker's pup, were his sole companions in a world that was otherwise frostily silent and hostile. Of the mistress of the farm, he saw nothing. Once, when he knew she had gone forth to church, made a furtive visit to the farm parlor in an endeavor to glean some fragmentary knowledge of the young man whose place he had usurped and whose repute he had fastened on himself. There were many photographs hung on the walls and stuck in prim frames, but the likeness he sought for was not among them, and at last, in an album thrust out of sight, he came across what he wanted. There was a whole series labeled Tom, a prodigy child of 3, and a fantastic frock, and a awkward boy of about 12 holding a cricket bat, as though he beloathed it. A rather good-looking youth of 18, with very smooth, evenly parted hair, and finally, a young man with a somewhat surly daredevil expression. This last portrait, Stoner looked with particular interest. The likeness to himself was unmistakable. From the lips of old George, who was girlish enough to most subjects, he tried again and again to learn something of the nature of the offense, which shut him off as a creature to be shunned and hated by his fellow men.
What do the folk around here say about me?
He asked one day as they were walking home from an outlying field. The old man shook his head.
They be bitter again, you mortal bitter. It is a sad business. A sad business.
And never could he be got to say anything more enlightening. On a clear frosty evening, a few days before the festival of Christmas, Stoner stood in a corner of the orchard, which commanded a wide view of the countryside. Here and there, you could see the twinkling dots of lamp or candle glow, which told of human homes where the goodwill and jollity of the season held their sway. Behind him lay the grim, silent farmhouse, where no one ever laughed, where even a quarrel would have seemed cheerful. As he turned to look at the long gray front of the gloom-shrouded building, a door opened and old George hurried forth. Stoner heard his adopted name called in a tone of strained anxiety, and instantly B knew that something untoward had happened. With a quick revulsion of outlook, his sanctuary became his eyes became a place of peace and contentment, from which he had dreaded to be driven.
Master Tom,
said the old man in a hoarse whisper.
you must slip away quite from here for a few days. Michael Lay is back in the village, and he swears to shoot you if he can come across you. He'll do it, too. There's murder in the look of him. Get away under cover of night. 'Tis only for a week or so. He won't be here longer. But where am I to go?
Stammered Stoner, who caught the infection of the old man's obvious terror.
Go right away along the coast of Punchford and keep hid there. When Michael's safe gone, I'll ride the roan over to the Green Dragon at Punchford. When you see the Cobb's stable at the Green Dragon, it is a sign you may come back again. But
began Stoner hesitantly.
'Tis all right for money,
said the other.
The old missus agrees you'd best do as I say, and she giving me this.
The old man produced 3 sovereigns and some odd silver. Stoner felt more of a cheat than ever as he stole away that night from the back gate of the farm with the old woman's money in his pocket. Old George, the broker's pup, stood watching him as a silent farewell from the yard. He could scarcely fancy that he would ever come back, and he felt a throb of compunction for those 2 humble friends who would wait wistfully for his return. Someday, perhaps, the real Tom would come back, and there would be wild wonderment among those simple farm folk as to the identity of the shadowy guest they had harbored under their roof. For his own fate, he felt no immediate anxiety. 3 pounds goes but little way. In the world when there is nothing behind it, but to a man who has counted his exchequer in pennies, It seemed a good starting point. Fortune had done him a wisdom kind turn when at last he trod those lanes as a hopeless adventurer, and there might yet be a chance of his finding some work and making a fresh start. As he got further from the farm, his spirits rose higher. There was a sense of relief in the regaining once more his lost identity and ceasing to be the uneasy ghost of another. He scarcely bothered to speculate about the implacable enemy who had dropped from nowhere into his life. Since that life was now behind him, one unreal item that more made little difference. For the first time for many months, he began to hum a careless, light-hearted refrain. Then there stepped out from the shadow of an overhanging oak tree a man with a gun. There was no need to wonder who he might be. The moonlight falling onto his white-set face revealed a glare of human hate such as Stoner. And in the ups and downs of his wanderings and never seen before. He sprang aside in a wild effort to break through the hedge that bordered the lane. But the thought held him. Branches held him. The hounds of fate had waited for him in those narrow lanes, and this time they were not to be denied.